You're probably not aware of it, but you are part of one of the largest and best groups of people there is. From its basic US origins to the big screen, this is the history of car culture. It's the 1950s. The Second World War has ended, more money was coming into America, television was taking over, and basically life was better. US veterans were making massive money and cars became more obtainable to the public. There was also an all-new array of services such as drive-thrus and drive-in theatres. People were finding more things to do and more ways to express themselves. This obviously led to people trying to crave an itch that they couldn't fulfill, except through modifying their cars. Car modifications first became a thing with moonshine runners, modding their cars to escape the police. This led to the birth of NASCAR and hot rods. In the 1950s, hot rods are cars that were mainly classic cars that have massive engines that are tuned for speed. The typical hot rods are cars based off the Ford Model A, the Deuce Coupe, and in the UK, the Ford Popular. These cars were sold in large numbers, so everyone had one. This only encourages owners to play with their cars more. To stand out, people will go to great lengths to modify their Model A's and Deuces. Modifications include chop tops, bigger engines, insane paint jobs, shiny wheels with a million spokes. The list goes on and on. After spending time at the drive-thru or the drive-in theatre, car owners would go cruising. This was basically driving around with your friends aimlessly. It grew strong bonds between drivers, and it also represented the freedom of driving and having a full license. Routes often consisted of strips or main city streets where they would show off their finest creations. It's a practice still performed today. Along came the 1960s. People began to turn away from vintage hot rods, and instead they aimed towards more modern cars. The US aimed towards muscle cars like the Ford Mustang, Pontiac GTO and Dodge Charger, while in Europe, most people began tuning cars they saw on the racetrack. The motorsport that they would watch would not be Formula 1, but rather touring car racing. The competing cars consisted of Minis, Ford Escorts, Jaguar Mark IIs, and the Ford Cortina. So what was so significant about touring cars? Well, they drove the same cars as you. When you see someone in a modified version of your car kicking ass, you want to be just like them. So you put in a bigger engine, add some stripes, added some wheel arches and wider tyres. You did whatever you could to make your car stand out and be the best. Car tuning was so popular that car makers released tuned versions of their cars to the public. Examples include the Lotus Cortina and the Mini Cooper S. This type of car culture remained basically unchanged for the next 40 years or so, but it did bring some new things such as hot hatchbacks. These cars became popular as car tuners had grown up and began to have families. This meant that they needed space but wanted something fun and cool. Fine examples include the Golf GTI, the Ford Fiesta XR2, and so on. In the 80s we had the rise of the turbocharger. To combat emission laws, automakers gave their cars smaller turbocharged engines. This meant that there were very small but mighty cars racing around. Examples include the Renault 5 GT Turbo and the Ford Escort RS Turbo. Turbos only allowed tuners to unlock even more potential out of their engines. The tuner scene experienced a massive evolution in the late 1990s through to the early 2000s. This was due to two things: Gran Turismo and of course the Fast and the Furious. Gran Turismo showed the world a wide array of Japanese monsters such as the Nissan Skyline GTR, Mitsubishi Lancer Evolution, and so on. Cars that were only ever sold in Japan soon made their way to Europe, and a select few were sold in the US. Meanwhile, the Fast and Furious, although not 100% accurate to real life, had inspired the current and next generation of car tuners. Crazy colours, tons of neon, insane Japanese graphics, banging stereos, and God knows what else. This craze only spread even faster, with legendary video games like Need for Speed Underground 1 and Underground 2 being released within 12 months of one another. Everyone wanted to be Brian O'Connor, and they would use whatever they could get their hands on to do it. Fast forward to the early 2010s, and we have three groups of car tuners. We have the stance guys who use lowering springs, coilovers, camber kits, and more recently super advanced air suspension kits to make sure the car is as low as possible. We have the nostalgic guys who would buy mainly classic German cars from the 80s and 90s. These guys would only use period correct modifications, and they will not go overboard just to make their cars slightly better than you. Finally, we have the super tuners. With advancements in ECU tuning and the fact that there are so much more tuning companies available, this has allowed people to go to town on car modifications. We have Evos, Supras and Corvettes that have over 1000 brake horsepower and will make mincemeat of the most expensive supercars around. We also have a new way of how cars are tuned. Gone are the neon kits and stupid stereo systems, and in our classy white body kits, the rat look, bazooka style cars which are mainly in Japan, and so on. Thanks to social media, we all know the next best thing, what our friends are doing with their cars, and we are aware of future meets and events in our area. Although everyone is very different, we all share the same interest. We love cars, and we all do our best to express our passion.